further ado, it is my great pleasure. He's been fantastic all week and contributing to roundtables. I've heard him a number of times, and he's absolutely fabulous. Please welcome Norman Wagner, Head of Group Media, Deutsche Telekom.
Thanks for this introduction, William. And yeah, it has been a fantastic experience so far. So yeah, let me start with my keynote. Let me do one click first. And yeah, the last days here when you are at ICOM, we talked a lot about what's coming next, what's the future, what are the barriers we have to overcome, and how to transform our businesses. But sometimes when you look in the future the whole day and the whole time, sometimes it makes sense to look a little bit into the past to see what we can learn from historic occasions. So that's what I want to do with my keynote, is look in the past. And actually, I'm not only looking in the past a little bit, I'm looking in the past 1,500 years. 2,500 years actually. It's back to the ancient Greek philosopher Plato. So looking at what his thoughts were on changing, on transformation, on behavior, and he wrote one masterpiece from my point of view, which is the Allegory of the Cave. And let me introduce that to you in a very short summary. So the story he is telling is there's a cave. Yeah, that's why it's called Allegory of the Cave. And in the cave, there are prisoners. They are sitting there in front of a wall and are bound tight. So they can only look to a wall. They've never seen anything else than this wall their whole life. Scary picture, but yeah, it's quite old. So, and behind that wall, there's a fire. This fire lights the cave. In front of that fire, there are puppets, and they are brought by puppets players. So the puppets player keep on moving there and showing the puppets over the wall. And of course, what's happening? There are shadows on the wall. The puppets throw shadow on the wall, and that's all these prisoners has seen the whole life. So what they do, they start discussing what they see. They create their own language. Oh, that's that, that's that, that's that, and starting actually a kind of science out of that. So the one who could predict the best what's coming next and what's happening. So he's the master. He's the master of the prisoners. So it's really, he got, when you do good predictions, you are winning the prisoners game. That's what Plato was saying. Sounds familiar? Yeah, prediction is a big topic also here on the roundtables. So now Plato says, one of these prisoners is helped to get out of the cave. So one is released. The liberated one now goes outside the cave. He has a problem, because when you are in a dark cave the whole life, your eyes are only used to the darkness. So when you go in the bright light, you don't see anything. And so he starts to look at the floor and sees the shadows, because this guy looks quite familiar to him. But with the time, his eyes get used to the brightness, and he even can see the sun, and he can see the whole reality. So he sees that the world is actually different to what he's experienced the whole of his life. So what he does next, going back in the cave and tell the others. So that's what he's doing. What's happening? Now he comes down to his fellow prisoners and say, hey guys, this is different. So they ask him, yeah, but you know, this shadow, and now his eyes are used to brightness, and he can't see the shadows anymore. So the other prisoners start making jokes on him and saying, hey, come on, you can't see the reality of what we see here. So, and it seems when you go outside, it's really harmful. UIs get broken, and we will never want that. It's totally worthless. We can't see the shadows anymore, and you are really bad in interpretation and prediction. We don't want that. So we definitely refuse to go out of the cave. Plato actually writes, we will kill everyone who tries to bring us outside. So that's the analogy of the cave. So what I now tried is to say, okay, what is an interpretation to our world? So the digital allegory of the cave. In that moment, I say, it's us. The prisoners in this digital ecosystem, it's us. So we are the prisoners. The fire is the data, because everything what we do in our ecosystem is driven by data. So all we see comes from data. The puppeteers, the puppet players, is the digital ecosystem. So it's the attack, it's the GAFAs who trained us all our lives when we on how to interpret the data, what to do, what are the strategies. And so next is, what are the shadows? The shadows is the needs and demands which are projected. So the digital ecosystem is very much on targeting on where you identify demands and needs. And so we build it not only our own language, but we are creating our own strategies all the time on how to optimize our ecosystems for that need. So this is the ecosystem we exist in. So when we now go outside of that cave, so how that would look like when we are now not only in the digital world, we apply our digital knowledge. So we've seen that here in the discussion, for example, with CTV, it's now TV becomes digital. So we also apply everything which we learned. So we see how can we make better targetings and find the ones which have a demand and a need. And we are looking at people out there saying, oh, this guy has an old car, he probably needs a new one. And but actually, maybe he doesn't want a new one. So it's not a need. So we're trying to see needs everywhere. That's the shadows we look at. But actually, the potential of the markets are much bigger. And not only the ones which we see, where we see shadows, but there are so many potential customers which don't have a need so far. So what we need to do is create demand, create new demands for our products, because this is how we grow. And we are stuck on identifying where the demand is. So how can we grow? When you have an ice cream, there is not much signal on someone wanting an ice cream. But when you hear this Magnum ice chocolate cracking, you get demand, and especially when it's as hot as here outside. So we need new strategies on how to create demand. We need bigger ad formats. We need forced video views. For example, skippable video. Who is not skipping it? The one who really has a demand. But everyone where you want to create a demand probably is skipping it because he doesn't know that he has a demand already. So it's very tricky. We need new strategies to raise or to make use of the whole potential and really to grow our markets. So going back into that cave and talking about that. So we need new ad formats. It needs to be bigger, maybe homepage events, maybe planning for reach, and get rid of targeting from time to time. So what's happening? If you take away the data signals on demands and say, we want to create demand, so we get broader, all the KPIs you have, like click rate, CPOs, and so on, they will be worse because you have to create a demand first. And so far, we are only targeting people who have a demand. So what's happening? Quite obvious. And it's the same what Plato said. This is bad for our campaigns. We shouldn't do that. We shouldn't do this kind of ad formats. We shouldn't do that grades because all our KPIs will drop. So it's worthless. Let's not do that. And let's stay with the strategies we have so far. So there is a huge barrier for transformation. There's a huge barrier for changing the strategy because you are only looking on the KPIs you had so far. and you don't see the whole potential. It's working for you pretty good. When you are in the cave, that's what you are famous for. So to be more precise, and as I only 10 minutes left, I only have 2 examples, which are, I think, one of the big caves we are currently looking at. And the one is digital net reach. So it's when you want to create demand, one of the main strategies you have to do is really reach and frequency. And the digital ecosystem is built in silos. So have a reach across the silos, or even see a reach at all. For example, Facebook. The simple question, how many people did I reach in the last, with the posts I have on my Facebook channel? How many different people did I reach with my Facebook channel? Very simple question. And I think very relevant question. You will not get an answer. This fact is actually not available, and not available in one silo. And across silos, it's even more difficult. And now, when you look at developments which we have with CTV, now we have the big screen where we had reach, and now we're going into an ecosystem applying the digital knowledge. We will have so many different layers where you pay at. It's the Rakus, the Satus, and so on. You have the OEMs, the Samsungs, the LG, you have the broadcaster, the set-top box. So you have many ways how to become your ad on the big screen, but they are all in silo. And so it will be very difficult to create a campaign where you can create demand. And it gets even worse when you go try to do that cross media. In that moment, you even have different measures. You don't even have different methodologies, how the figures, the KPIs are researched and what you see. And this gets really, really tricky because everyone is looking at the logic they created within their cave. And actually, it's a whole scenery of cave. We are living in a cave scenery. It's not only a digital cave. We have a TV cave with a lot of history on how to do that. We have a print cave. We have a out-of-home cave, which sounds so funny, by the way, out-of-home cave. But, and they are all different. They all have their logic, and it's very difficult to get out of these caves. But we need all of them to make a proper campaign and to build our brands and to generate growth. We have to step into every cave and have to know all the rules in the caves, but we have to apply it on a wider perspective. So what do we learn from Plato? Plato's digital lessons. So first of all, just because we don't see the shadows perfectly, that doesn't mean that we see bad. It's be open to different perspectives. When you want to do transformation, it's important to get different views on things and not to narrow your mindset and to narrow your way, your KPIs to what you've been used to do, because change very often means that what you've done in the past might get less good, but the overall picture might be better. So it's important to be open-minded and not just say, no, but that's not good because of my measures only. And we shouldn't optimize the shadows only. It's not everything is about demands and needs and what we see. So the puppets or the shadows on the wall, there's more than only these shadows, because these shadows are only the ones which are shown by the ecosystem. And the ecosystem, we need to be aware that the puppeteers have their own interest. They all want to tell you something. And actually, with the puppeteers being in a silo, you have not only one fire, like in Plato's cave, every silo has its own fire. And it's quite obvious what is happening. If there is a consumer, so let's say a puppet and a fire, and there are multiple fires behind, you can imagine what's happening off the wall. You see the same consumer multiple times. And that's actually what is really happening in our digital ecosystem, because you don't have a proper deduplication, and there are multiple fires. And these fires only illuminate a small section of the reality, because very often it only works when you have cookies. It only works when you have an attribution to the cookie, and so on. And these fires are getting weaker and weaker. So we see less and less, and we need to be aware of that these fires are going away. And that's what we are faced with. And finally, we need to make sure that we speak a common language. You know, we had the discussion here, what is your view? And every silo sometimes has different views. And then this may differ by country. The definition, and we need to make sure that we understand these definitions, we understand the language of each cave and find a common language of that. So in a nutshell, transformation is very difficult when you're stuck with what you learned so far, and if you're not open to taking new views. So, and to take new views, we need to get out of our caves. We need to get out and talk with others, speak with others on our issues, how to create demand, what's their language. So get out of the caves. That's my view or my interpretation of Plato's allegory. I never used that word before, allegory of the cave. And yeah, thank you. If there are questions, we have a little time left.
Norman, thank you so much for that. That is absolutely brilliant. I love the fact that sort of we're still learning lessons from the great philosophers over the years.